Doris Marquardt is working at the European Commission, and more particularly in the unit on research and innovation at the Directorate General for Agriculture and Rural Development. And she worked more particularly on issues related to digitalization at the agricultural sector and rural areas.
Yes, let's start with one presentation on EU policies to enable the uptake and effective deployment of digital technologies in farming. And I will focus on potential for OFE support and with two viewpoints. What is the importance of OFE for policy making? And how can policies support OFE experimentation? Let's have a closer look. And I will tell you in 12 minutes. I can at some point only raise your interest and stimulate the discussion later. So I will be quick and provide an overview only, not going into detail at all points. So what is the motivation for policymakers? You all know the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy. And what is important here? We have ambitious targets to be reached by 2030. And this is a tough timeline to be met. And important here, in context of this presentation, we want to have measurable targets. So quantification and to make it really feasible. They are quantified. We know that digitalization can serve as an enabler. Digitalization is not an aim in itself, but it can contribute to achieving other objectives, policy objectives and ambitions, particularly sustainability related in agriculture. And we also know, on the other hand, that the potential of digitalization is not fully exploited in agriculture. So as a policy perspective, we see there's still potential to exploit the potential of digital technologies. We have several things to do depending on the socioeconomic background and the country and the situation. But among the actions needed to fully exploit the potential is strengthening broadband capacities, capacity buildings, digital skills, enabling the exchange of information. And if you look at the end of the line, promoted targeted research and innovation is also one key, particularly, for instance, to find cost-effective solutions towards digitalization. Overall, we can say that a comprehensive approach is needed to boost digitalization, and I think that came also evident in the first presentation by Sophie today. Yes, but still, there are quite some challenges for policymakers to be considered. In the Common Agriculture Policy, digitalization has indeed special importance in the so-called cross-cutting objective. The potential of digitalization as an enabler is acknowledged, and member states are invited to elaborate digitalization strategies. But then there are two key questions to be addressed. Which measures are very effective to boost digitalization? And which impacts can be achieved through certain digital tools to achieve, for instance, certain policy targets? And those questions are not easily addressed. And here, OFE and experimentation can really make a difference. So if we look at the long list of possible tools in the Common Agriculture Policy post-2020, which may influence the uptake and the effective use and deployment of digital technologies, you see it wrong. And to the decision to be taken which measures to opt for to boost digitalization is challenging. And we can even extend the list and also look beyond the Common Agriculture Policy, because there are also a range of instruments available to support digitalization in agriculture, starting from Horizon Europe, Research and Innovation, to the Digital Euro program, a new program at the European level in this funding period, or the Recover and Resilience Facility, where we can support digital and data infrastructure and digital skills at larger scale. I will not go into detail into all the instruments, but focus on those with such a potential to support living labs or the OFE approach in particular, and then discuss and how far they can really make a contribution to experimentations on the farms. So I think you here are having already discussed 1.5 days. You know the criterion and the attributes of OFE or living labs very well. So it's a testing under real life condition to bringing different stakeholders together, multiple disciplines, co-creation, and that are the common attributes of OFE and living labs. So it's also a use of combination of multiple methods and tools and disciplines and domains. And at the bottom of the slide, you see, okay, possible attributes. It's not always the case, but ideally, OFE and experimentations have demonstration effects. They may have a critical mass, so having different sites to make it a network of sites, to have comparison and to have this exchange between experimentation facilities. And then also allow monitoring and evaluation systems and impact assessment of the experiments in a structured way. So here, for OFE in general, digital technologies as enabler might be fostered under several experimentations, which maybe have a specific purpose, for instance, furthering soil health. If we look at policy instruments, we can classify them. So first of all, the level of maturity of innovation targeted, then the targeted beneficiaries, and the type of support. Important here to differentiate between networking, for instance, within an experiment or between experimentation sites. Communication actions might be supported, or investment costs, staff costs. And then important in the field of experimentation, the duration of measures. How long will support be available? So having those criteria in mind, we can look at different policy measures. Most of you will probably be familiar with the multi-actor approach. That will continue in this forthcoming or already ongoing funding period. We have the operational groups under the EIP-ACRI, the European Innovation Partnership, where we have the multi-actor approach at the ground, bringing the farmers and scientists and innovators together and having individual experimentations and the support of us. But those experimentation sites are not necessarily linked to each other. If so, if you would like to have a network of sites, that needs to be programmed or strategically arranged at some way. Then we have the multi-actor approach under Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe now in this funding period. And we have already some experience, and that motivated us to program it again and to give more attention to it. So if I now in the following introduce some measures under Horizon Europe, they are settled in Pillar 2 in the middle of the slide here, and I don't focus on all Pillar 1 and Pillar 3 and only select some examples. So it's not a comprehensive overview or checking of the possibilities under Horizon Europe. So which actions are relevant under Horizon Europe if we look at digitalization agriculture and at the OFE approach? So first of all, we always have the opportunity to program topics in a way that a multi-actor approach is required, and that, for instance, demonstration farms are set as one element to be addressed in a topic, in a call. That is one side. But in addition, in this funding period, we have a Horizon Europe candidate partnership, agroecology, and living labs that explicitly focus on experimentation on the farm. So that is currently under development and foreseen to be funded in the work program 23-24. And in addition, we have a mission on soil health, where living labs form a key cornerstone to achieve the targets. So under both, digitalization is not the central element, but agroecology and soil health. But digitalization may always fall as an enabler under the experimentations to be included, testing digital tools to achieve the objectives of those activities. Here's an example, the design of the mission, where we have the focus on 100 living labs and lighthouses. And you see here where the living labs are embedded. It's one element of the overall mission to produce the outcomes and the objectives, for instance, to prevent soil erosion, What is important here is a network of living labs which will allow comparisons, the exchange on the subjects, and to bring the different experience together, focusing on a common objective to be achieved. Here is one example how to program living labs and to embed it into the programming of European Union programs here in the mission. And I will not go into detail here, but it's important that it's possible to have a scope and an objective and aims to be achieved, and then to frame it, allowing enough flexibility for living labs to develop or offer experiments, and then still to have fulfillment of the program requirements. And you will also find that here already a possible link to the EIP Agri, funded under the Common Agriculture Policy, is set, inviting others to use the opportunity to achieve synergies. Now we are looking at the Digital Europe program, that, as indicated, that is a new program. And in comparison to Horizon Europe, the difference is that we are not looking at research and innovation, but innovation and capacity building and digitalization in general across sectors. So it's an upper innovation scale and a higher level of maturity. And in the so-called testing and experimentation facilities for AI and agri-food, it is aimed at to bring innovative solutions in AI technologies, achieving market maturity, and to bring them onto the market and to the end users. And for this, it is foreseen to have a kind of trial farms or trial fields to be supported, but also a set of trial farms and trial fields to allow for a comparison. So what is the difference here is that the experimentation is at a large or later stage. It's not real experimentations on the farm in the production methods, but a final testing, but a kind of experimentation is still be given. So there's also foreseen the exchange of experience and visits by experts and links to so-called digital innovation hubs, which are also funded under the Digital Europe program. What are digital innovation hubs? So they are operating at regional level. They're bringing together innovators and innovative digital solutions to the end users, building capacity in a region. For instance, you may have questions on legal requirements or financial models. And digital innovation hubs are bringing together the key experts to achieve innovation to be functioning in practice. And what is important here for the offer and living labs approach, that through digital innovation hubs, there's the establishment of regional innovation ecosystems. And those, again, may create an environment stimulating the setup and the inspiration of new offer and living labs. So that is quite important, because many of you who have practiced experimentation, sometimes it's about key actors meeting each other, having ideas, coming together and bringing it forward, and then writing a joint application or even doing it on own cost because of the interest. So it's also about networking and inspiration. And so that might not be ignored in support instruments to offer and living labs. And another instrument supported under the Common Agriculture Policy is the so-called Agriculture Knowledge and Innovation System. And I'm quite happy that in the last presentation before the break, it was mentioned it is important that there is a link between policy and actors on the ground and the results of OPA to make it sure to be uptaken. So what is about the Agriculture Knowledge and Innovation Systems? They are intended to be set up in the member states to link the persons in the agriculture field who produce and take up knowledge, involving the practitioners, advisors, and policymakers and scientists, for instance. And here, the possible relevance for OFA and living labs is really about results sharing and to be interlinked, having a kind of networking support to roll out OFA experiences and ensure the uptake of, for instance, in policy measures, in the mainstreaming. If you know that one experiment and a production approach works, to deliver results, for instance, as regards environmental and sustainability, it can be communicated here. And it might be taken up in policy measures, for instance, agri-environmental schemes. So I think it's also important, the networking support, to keeping actors motivated. Because until you have results, feasible results, in experimentation facilities, it takes time. And the interchange and the networking may keep actors motivated on a longer period to keep on with their experimentation. So here's a summarizing overview of selected possibilities to support OFE and Living Labs in the funding period post-2020, with a particular focus on digitalization. So we have the Horizon Europe program, where we have the key focus on research and innovation, then the Digital Europe program, where we have more innovation and upscaling of innovation, deployment and capacity building, and the Common European Agriculture Policy, where we have innovation support and capacity building, but more at the side of the end users. So, and you see that we have different caveats and strengths for the different instruments. For instance, OFE and Living Labs can be supported under Horizon Europe, but it requires dedicated programming right from the beginning, already starting at European level. For the Digital Europe program, it's that we have the mature stage of innovation. So it's not really experimentation at the start of innovation, but it's the upscaling of innovation only, but still we have the networking and the experimentation at a certain stage. And looking at the Common Agriculture Policy and operational groups, there we have the effect that the operational groups are not automatically linked to one, for instance, Living Lab network, but that needs to be programmed as well. And the ACES finally, as introduced, that may interlink OFE actors, policymakers, and may ensure the uptake of the results of experimentation in the field of agriculture and digitalization. To conclude, so OFE and Living Labs are clearly important to facilitate agriculture and the uptake in digitalization. So that is clearly important, and it also provides great input, or has the potential to provide input to policy making. So to decide which measures work, to design new measures, and to mainstream measures. We at European level, for instance, have observed that experimentation under the European Innovation Partnership for Agriculture led to results which then were translated into mainstream policy measures. And this potential is clearly given. Support to OFE and Living Labs needs a tailored design of policy measures, adjusted to the need, for instance, as experimentation may fail, so it cannot automatically be in the mainstream programs right from the beginning, but is rather in the innovation scene to be given. It needs also adjusted design as regards, for instance, to duration and the networking support. So it's not only about experimentation and the cost as such, but also the design needs to consider the need for exchange and also systematic monitoring of the results to measure the effects. In the post-2020 period at European level, in the European Union, there are a number of policy instruments directly or indirectly supporting OFE and Living Labs in agriculture, particularly also in the field of digitalization. But as said, those opportunities have to be used at European level, at national level, or by the actors at the ground in a proactive way, and have to be designed and shaped in a way that they are suitable for OFE experimentation. So that means through the interplay of policy measures and dedicated programming at the different levels and a different environment for OFE and Living Labs can be created. So digital technologies will probably also play a role in OFE and Living Labs, particularly also when the sustainability dimensions are at best, because they are forming a part of the experimentation. At the current stage, there is no concrete project dedicated to digitalization and living labs. And with that, I hope I provided an input and look forward to the discussion at the end. Thank you.